Welcome to In the Seams, a podcast by Broken and Mended with your host, David Heflin.
Well, hello and welcome you back to In the Seams. And I'm very excited to be back on the show today. And I have a guest, Sara Willoughby is with me. And Sara is the founder of a very important conference for people with chronic illness called Diamonds Conference. And that's been going on for several years. And she's going to tell us a little bit about that here in a moment. I got connected with Sara through a mutual contact with a ministry called Chronic Joy. I've talked about them before, and they're always good to check out as well. But that led to a conversation between Sara and I, and which has led to an opportunity for me to get to speak at Diamonds Conference, the summer version of that, which is coming up here in just a few weeks. And so I'm excited for that opportunity, and I wanted to take advantage of that opportunity to talk with Sara and to be able to get people excited about that conference and hopefully get them signed up. And I'll mention at the onset here that it is a free conference for those who participate in it live. And I really hope that a lot of people will take the time to check it out. And I think it will be a great source of encouragement and spiritual formation for people who are struggling with chronic illness and chronic pain. And so, Sara, thank you very much for being with us and taking the time. And I just want to ask you if you can begin by telling our listeners a little bit about yourself and where you're from and what your story with chronic illness has been.
Yeah, thank you for having me, David. And we are so excited to have you speaking at this coming event. My team is just very excited to have you on board.
Thank you.
Where I'm from is a question that I never know how to answer because I have grown up living all over the place, moving around the US and internationally for various reasons. So I first, my story with chronic illness, I first got sick when I was 14, just turned 14. And I was undiagnosed for a long time. I was undiagnosed for 9 months, which I know in the chronic illness world is honestly not that long to be undiagnosed.
Sure.
And many people have to walk through that for a lot longer. But yeah, I was living in Washington State at the time. It was beautiful, evergreen, rainy state, and I loved the lifestyle and the environment, but my body did not. And so, long story short, eventually I was diagnosed with toxic mold poisoning, Lyme disease, and multiple chemical sensitivity. And so from there, my family didn't know what to do. So we went to Arizona, nice dry desert Arizona, where we didn't think there was going to be any mold, which is not entirely true, but we had friends there that were the only people we'd ever heard of that had any experience with toxic mold poisoning. And so we went, moved there, no place to live for a while in that process with mold poisoning and mycotoxins from mold that were just got into everything we owned, because my mold exposure was from mold that was growing in our walls, and we didn't know that. And so in that process, we lost a lot of the majority of our material possessions. We just uprooted unexpectedly as a family and found ourselves in Arizona. And so we were house hunting for a while, trying to find a place to live that didn't have water damage, which was very hard, and that was didn't have if it was brand new without water damage, it had all these paint chemicals and things like that because my liver was wrecked, could not handle. And so it was a long process, but God provided a place that was just exactly what we needed. He provided the funds that we didn't have for that place to live. And we moved in, and I started to do better. And then one day, my mom found me on the bathroom floor, and I couldn't move, and I couldn't feed myself, and I couldn't go to the bathroom by myself, and I was just not functioning. And so out of desperation, we tried one more doctor, and she was doctor, I think, number 17, because people had been like, well, I don't know what to do with you. Try this specialist. I don't know the answer. Try this specialist. And so we just got passed along from doctor to doctor. But this doctor that was recommended by a family friend, she ended up being able to help me. And it was like she happened to have a specialty, and she happened to have a practice 30 minutes away, and she happened to have an opening for a new patient, and just all of these things that were just so clearly God working, and God honestly just really protecting me, because when we went to see her, she told my parents that if I hadn't come in, I would have died within a month. Not something that every 15-year-old hears.
Right.
um, and so, uh, yeah, it was a long process, long roller coaster of healing. I think before all of this, I didn't think healing was so complicated, or I didn't think it was so long, and I didn't know what the word chronic meant. But yeah, so it was a couple years of that healing process of flare-ups and going back and then taking steps forward and falling back again. But yeah, that was the general picture of what my chronic illness journey was like up until about 18.
So, and may I ask, how old are you now?
I am about to turn 22.
Okay. So between 18 and almost 22, has it been better for you? Has you been able to function better?
Yeah, so it's been just a process and a stepping stone of healing and recovering, but it's thankfully, I started to be able to function more normally, and then start to branch out, start to like dreams that had died when I was like, I'm going to be chronically ill in this way for the rest of my life. And just, dreams had died. And so they started to God resurrected them, and he gave some of them back to me. And yeah, so now I'm still sensitive to mold. I'm still sensitive to chemicals. I still can't eat a lot of variety, but I'm able to be in much lower daily pain and be able to think and to function, and yeah, like in the ways that I would like to.
Yeah. Well, I'm very glad to hear that. I know that part of your journey, and maybe a really big turning point in your journey in terms of coming into ministry to others with chronic illness, has to do with a book you wrote. And I'll just say, as an aside, my family has benefited from that as well, because my own son was. Uh, became, right before he was 16, became chronically ill, and we started to have quite a bit of struggle seeing him change so much, because he just didn't have the energy to do any of the stuff that he liked to do for a while. And I found your book online and got it for him, and I know it was a blessing to him. So tell us a little bit about that book and how you came to write that. Yeah, just tell us a little bit about. Tell us the title too, in case someone wants to look it up and get it for themselves.
Yeah, I am so glad to hear that it has been a blessing to your son, and I know that's hard, not just for the person who is sick, but the family. It's hard. It's a whole community journey to walk through. But yeah, my book is called "He's Making Diamonds: A Teen's Thoughts on Faith Through Chronic Illness." When I got sick. I was supposed to die. Then I didn't die, and um, but I still couldn't really function well and do the things that I wanted to do. And so I found myself bedridden. I found myself housebound, and I didn't know what to do, but what I could do was write, because I could do that from my bed. And brain fog definitely made that a challenge many days, but some of you know what I'm talking about. um, yeah, but I just wrote out of my questions of, God, why is this happening? And why now? And why me? And why my family? And how do I pray when I can't think in full sentences? And how do I honor you and like serve you when I can't even take care of myself? And how do I hold on to hope when hope is just disappointed over and over and over again? And what even is hope? Am I hoping in the wrong things? And so just all these questions are where my book came from. Before that, when I got sick, I started writing a blog, and then people started commenting and saying, "Wait, this is my story too," and sharing their stories with me. And so that's really where the book came from. So I spent that year focusing on writing this book, editing it, getting it to the point of publication. And yeah, so it's available on Amazon or barnesandnobles.com. He's Making Diamonds. But yeah, so then I finished the book and was like, now what? Which is where the Diamonds Conference came from.
Okay, well, and I'll put a link to a couple of those places, Barnes& and Noble and Amazon, in our show notes so that people can get that easily. And thank you for telling us about that. And so Diamonds Conference grew out of that. Now, if there's going to be some people listening to this, they don't know what Diamonds Conference is. And so tell me what you can about that and how that came about and what it is that you see God doing in that conference for people with chronic illness.
Yeah. So I got to this point and I was like, well, now what do I do? Because I still couldn't do everything I wanted to, still couldn't engage with my local community the way that I wanted to. Um, and a friend just suggested, like, what about she gave me a long bullet pointed list. And one of those things was like an online conference. In my naiveness, I said, that sounds like fun. And I had no idea what that entailed. But yeah, we are about to host our 8th event, June 23rd and 24th. And so what the Diamonds Conference is it is an online conference for Christians with chronic illnesses. It's like you were saying, it's free to attend live. But what it encompasses is a lot of different things. Primarily, it's like different speakers, like yourself, or just we've had a lot of speakers over the years sharing what they have learned, what God is teaching them through their chronic illness or their chronic pain. Um, and it's a chance to come together as a community and to engage with other people who get it and who understand. And so part of that is, I mean, there's also like a private Slack community for attendees to engage with each other throughout the year. We have a study guide to help like take the content and apply it to your own life and make it your own. But yeah, I think one of the biggest questions we often get is like, who is this for? It's for those who are chronically ill, but well, what does that mean? I think the question I get most often is, am I allowed to come? Like, am I sick enough? I only have chronic migraines, or I only have this or that. And I'm like, that's not how this is about. It's human hearts are amazingly alike. And so yeah, it's those who are suffering and those who love those who are suffering.
Yeah, well put. I've experienced questions like that with our support groups too. Sometimes people feel like, well, should I be in here because others are sicker than me? And I think if you feel that you need the encouragement, we want you to be here. And
Yes.
and I think it's never about how much more someone is suffering. What we're going through is difficult for the person that's going through it, and so, yeah, that's good. And certainly want to encourage everyone, that's listening to this podcast to please be a part of the conference and tell us the theme for this particular one.
Yeah, the theme for this summer event is resting in the storm.
Resting in
I
the
feel like,
storm.
yeah, for people who are chronically ill, we can think that I've struggled with these things. I felt like I'm resting so much already. All I do is lie in bed. So what does it mean to rest? Or I don't deserve to rest because that's all I do. So what's my purpose? And where's my purpose? Because I'm not doing anything or whatever. But rest is an act of worship to God. Rest is what Jesus modeled. Rest is possible even in the middle of chaos, even in the middle of suffering. And so, yeah, we're just diving into all of that with probably coming from the questions again, just like the book.
Yeah. Well, was encouraging to me to know. I was already thinking before I knew the theme, kind of what I was going to be wanting to talk about, and then it just kind of fit. I felt like really perfectly with that theme because I'm talking just for my readers. I'm sorry, my listeners' benefit. Want to say that what I'm going to be talking about has to do with kind of the way that Americans and Westerners in general often view time and productivity and how we attach value to that, so that when we're not able to do what we used to be able to do, we accept messages from our culture that were less valuable. And so I'm wanting to
Yeah.
articulate a view of time that's completely different than that, which is a time that is focused in the quality of our interactions and relationships, and it's not tied to productivity, and that there's grace in that. God, and that grace comes from this idea of rest, which is embedded in the creation itself, and is the first day that is set aside. First thing that the Bible says is made holy is the Sabbath, which is, which is a word that
Uh-huh.
means rest. And so I'm excited about that because I just feel like this is such an important thing for people with chronic illness to be able uh, to grasp that they are valued for who they are, for their relationship with God and the relationship with others, not because they can do, A, B, and C, or do this much of that and spend this much time doing that, and or because of their careers, and it's a very countercultural message, but it is one that's always been at the heart of the kingdom of God. And yet, Jesus, who tells us, to all those who are weary and heavy laden or burdened, depending on which translation you use there, to come unto me, and I will give you rest. uh, and like you said, it's worship, it's grace, it's beautiful. So it's exciting, and so glad to get to partake in it, and so glad for others that we'll get to as well, and looking forward to hearing from the other speakers. You kind of touched on this a little bit through the process of writing your book, and then how it evolved into the Diamond Conference. But or Diamonds Conference, I wanted to ask just about how your relationship with God has changed, or maybe your perspective on that through your journey with chronic illness. So as you're kind of taking you said you're 22 now, or about to be, and it started at 14. You got an 8-year snapshot. How would you say your relationship with God has changed through this experience?
Yeah. So when I grew up in a Christian home, I was the pastor's kid. And I think somewhere along the line in that time, before I got sick, my faith became my own, and I started to like seek God for myself and spend time with God on my own. But it was really bubble wrapped. I had a really bubble wrapped faith, I think, in that I didn't really face any major challenges or suffering or anything like that. And so when I got sick, it's really, I had to confront my faith. Can my faith stand up to what I'm facing? Can God stand up to the questions that I'm having, and the suffering that my family was going through, that I was going through? And I think the temptation of people and me can be to hide from our questions, or to shove them aside, to be like, well, we shouldn't have these questions, we should know the answers to these things, or whatever. But I think that really separates us from God. I think those things become barriers for coming close to Him, and sharing our true, like their deepest heart with Him. Um, and so what I did was I just asked God these questions. And that's where the book came from, and the conference and all of that was asking these questions. But before it was all this public stuff, and even while it was that public stuff, it was in my heart. It was sitting there and crying and not having answers, and saying, God, why and God, how, and asking him these things. And that's where I think the greatest intimacy with him came in that. Not to say that it was like this magical overnight thing. There were days where I was just unable to engage with God in the way I wanted to. There were times where I was angry, where I was terrified, where I was grieving. And there are two occasions where I remember just giving up. Like, God, I can't pursue you anymore. I don't know where to go from here. And he met me in that. He met me in that honesty and those questions and those that sharing of the things that I didn't think I was supposed to be feeling or thinking. And I think that's where the like greatest intimacy with him is that I've experienced in my short young life, is in those moments. And so there was that in the like darkest moments. So there was that intimacy. And then as I started to physically heal, it got all turned upside down again. I was like, okay, like suffering had forced me to go to God constantly every day because I just couldn't do it on my own. And then things got like a little situationally easier. And I was so afraid of losing that intimacy with him. I was so like,
Hmm.
okay, well, when I'm not forced to him every day, am I actually going to be like coming to him in that way? Am I going to be close to him? How is this going to look in a new season of life? And so that started new wrestling, and the healing process you would think would be all joyful and cheerful, and it was not. It was grief, and it was processing, and it was trauma, and it was healing. And so um yeah, it's just been an ongoing journey and an ongoing process. Started out bubble wrapped, got to have some intimacy, like that was really sweet and beautiful, and then I'm still figuring out what it looks like in this new season of life.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that. And, that is such an interesting perspective you shared. I think not necessarily unique in the sense that others don't experience it, but maybe unique in the sense that we don't really draw attention to the idea that we're always going through a process of, if we're gaining something, we're losing something else. So whereas, I think about early on in your journey, you're losing physical health and the things that come with that, but you're gaining this deeper intimacy with God and a more authentic faith because of what you're wrestling with. But then as you get better, you start healing, you have a sense of, or at least a fear of losing something that has been gained through that experience. And it just kind of shows that it's really this whole chronic illness journey, both the good and the bad, is always a, a roller coaster in some ways. One in which we know God's got us, but we can't necessarily see the hills and the turns ahead either. And so that can make
Mhm.
it pretty challenging. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's given me something to think about a little bit because I'm in a season right now where I've been
Mhm.
feeling quite a bit better than I had than I have in recent years, which I'm very grateful for. And
Mhm.
but I need to contemplate some of these other things too. That it's never a simple process. Um,
Mhm.
and so maybe in all seasons in life we can learn that when we draw near to God, He draws near to us. So thank you for that. I know too, we've talked a little bit about your age, and I even know at my age, my problems started at, I think, 35, I believe. And, and would get a lot of times from older people in the church, oh, you're too young for that, which was never really that helpful, by the way. And you probably have heard some versions of that. But I'm
Mhm.
wondering, you have a perspective as someone who's had to deal with this from a very young age. And what is something that you would want to share with a younger person? That younger person, we can define them just anyone in their teens or early 20s or something like that. And what is something that you would want them to know at the beginning of their journey? And kind of a different way to look at the same question, but whatever works best in terms of answering it. Maybe what do you wish that you knew at the beginning of your journey?
Um, Yeah, I don't know if this is age specific, although I feel like maybe it could apply, especially to younger people, but you're not alone. And I wish I'd known that I wasn't alone. I think I felt like I was the only teenager sitting there watching my friends play and watching my friends be normal. And I was the only one sitting on the sidelines, and I was the only one unable, and I was the only one who felt like my body was really, really old. um, but my mind and my heart were young. And so, um, yeah, I think any person with chronic illness, I just want you to know you're not alone, because there are people who get it. I think, don't maybe quote me on this, although this is an interview, so whatever. But I think it's like 90 million Americans that are chronically ill, according to the CDC, or I think this was a
Wow,
study in 2018. Um, but that's insane. Like you're
it
not the
is.
only one with that's going through what you're going through. And because humans are amazingly alike, you're not the only one with the questions that you have. Um you're not alone in what you're going through. And even if no other person understood, because honestly, you are the only person going through the exact set of circumstances you are, with the past that you have and the future that you have and the dreams that you have. And so even if no one else understands you, God does. He sees you, he understands you, and he loves you in that, and he's with you in that. He doesn't abandon us. He doesn't leave us to figure it out on our own. And so, yeah, ultimately, what I want every person with a chronic illness to know, but especially the young people, is that you are not alone.
Yeah, awesome advice and insight, and so important for people to realize. And I know it's a big part of, I think, what chronic illness ministry is about, whatever kind of flavor of chronic illness ministry we're talking about: conferences, support groups, online resources, and or podcasts, whatever it might be. That is the reason why we're talking about it, is not just because it's maybe therapeutic for us. We're talking about it because we want people to know that they're not alone. And even as we share stories, that hopefully their stories are unique to them, but they will recognize things in our stories that are reflected in their own. Kind of like you talked about, where people were telling you when you were writing the blog, and that, oh yeah, that's my
Hmm.
story too. That there are these commonalities with the struggles, with the questions, and with some of the experiences that we can lean into God and learn from. And so yeah, that's really important. And it kind of brings us full circle in talking about the Diamond Conference, or I keep calling it it's Diamonds plural, right? That's a Diamonds Conference, because we're the
Yes.
diamonds in this case. Yeah. And we talked about the summer theme already. Well, actually, I did want to mention something else before I got to that, and I think you barely touched on it earlier: the Slack community. Because because I joined that community yesterday as part of just kind of getting familiar more with your ministry and the Diamonds Conference that's upcoming, and I think I saw like over 300 people that were in that community. Now, is this something that people can join directly, or they have to receive an invitation? How does it work if someone, and I'm asking if someone doesn't know anything really about Slack, because I didn't until I got onto this yesterday. Is that something people can join through a link, or how does that work?
Yeah. We are revamping our website at the moment. So I think that it will be on our website, Diamonds Conference. If you just Google that, it will come up. But if you want to be sure, you can go to that Diamonds Conference website and sign up for our summer event. Even if you're not able to attend live, and you can get all the resources that way, including all the community information. But yeah, the community is running throughout the year. We do different connecting things on there, places to just talk with different people who get what's going on. But actually, another recommendation is People Hope. This is not Diamonds connected, like affiliated or anything, but People Hope has a great ongoing program. It's called Focus Fix, and that's a way that maybe to like have resources and people connection throughout the year. Whereas Diamonds, I feel like, is often a chance to get to come together. But yeah, we totally have a community. It's been active for a couple of years. It's still daily active. But yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll try to include as much of the links and, certainly to your website and the registration for the conference. And like you said, hopefully they'll be able to find the information there. But I just wanted to come back to that point just because you were talking about helping people realize they're not alone and maybe seeing a community like that, like just visually seeing, oh my goodness, there are hundreds of people in this community, which is just one small fraction of, like you mentioned, all the millions of people out there that are struggling with, chronic illness and chronic pain. And so thank you for that. I think that's really a neat thing and a great source of support. Is there anything else about Diamonds Conference or the future of Diamonds Conference that you'd want to share, or even about the upcoming summer event?
Yeah, so a thought about community, if you don't mind. But
Yeah.
I think that often as those of us who are chronically ill, we can think that we're the only ones because we're head housebound and bedridden, or we are just not able to engage. And then when we do make it out into community, the other chronically ill people are also stuck at home or at the doctor's or whatever. And so, yeah, it can be easy to think they aren't out there, but they totally are. And I think online, there's so many tools for connecting. Um, yeah, but Diamonds, yeah, we usually do 2 events a year. This summer event is actually like a mini conference. It's like very bite-sized, easy to just take in. And then in the winter, including this coming winter, we normally have a longer event with like 20 something speakers. And so we plan on continuing to do that for the next couple years. We are in the process of becoming a official nonprofit at the moment. And also, if you are interested in getting involved beyond just attending, we are always looking for volunteer staff members. So we have about 30 volunteer staff members at the moment, which is amazing because the first event, it was me, teenage Sarah, in her bedroom with 2 friends who took pity on her. Not a good idea. um, and now yeah, so we're currently, looking for a website designer, looking for some people to help with moderators or to help with some behind the scenes stuff. So if anyone's interested in getting involved further, you can, whether that's joining the prayer team or whatever. There's lots of options, and you can find that all at the website.
Okay. Well, very good. And that is amazing that you have so many people willing to give of their time for this mission and this ministry. And it that's just cool. It's cool to see God moving people together to do something bigger than any one person can do by themselves. So thank you so much for sharing that opportunity as well as just that story. And again, I want to, thank you for coming on in the seams today to talk to us. And I know it'll be a blessing to both young and old, and in between, for people to hear some of your story and to see what God has done in that story to not only be a blessing to you, but also that blessing overflows to other people and that encouragement. So thank you so much for that. And I want to go ahead and, just kind of close our time out and just kind of remind our listeners that you can find anything you need to about Broken and Mended at brokenandmended.org, including this podcast will be available there as well, as well as the other places like Spotify and all that. Of course, if you're listening to the podcast, you don't need that information because you're listening to it. But anyway, it's available in a lot of different places, and we have a blog there as well, other resources, ways to connect to Broken and Mended on Facebook, as well as a way to join our support groups. And I will also include the information. You can find it in the show notes to get connected with Diamonds Conference and the other related community and service opportunities that we mentioned in our conversation. And so for now, I'm going to go ahead and sign off. And until next time, we hope that you keep drawing closer to Jesus through your journey.